Probably should have tagged y'all in there before I went on there so people could find y'all.
I can do a. I'm gonna just do a watch party on my phone.
Okay. Okay, there we go. Live. Let's see.
Yeah, I got it. I see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now I want to go. Okay, there we go. All right, we good. All right, let's see. Let me check on my phone.
I see it.
Okay. Cool. All right, let me just say something to it. Okay. All right, so we got some people on here already, so we'll just go ahead and start. Let me see real quick. What's good, everybody? My name is Jordan McLeod. I am the host of this conference, Fathers and Sons. One of the reasons why I wanted to do this conference was to have my brothers here share on some of the things that they've experienced either as a father or a son. Just different things that they have experienced, things that they have wrestled with, and also victories, things that God has brought them through. And the reason why I'm bringing this video or this conference to you is so you could be encouraged, and it can impact this generation and the generations to come. Specifically in terms of fatherless homes, it's a huge percentage. I know specifically in the Black community, it's the largest. It's about 70 or 75% are growing up without their father, not just males, but young ladies as well. And when I think about church culture and I think about, certain Sundays in terms of the church, when it comes to like a Father's Day, a lot of people are not really excited about that. I know some people are. It's actually the lowest type of event, if you will, of a certain day on Sunday is Father's Day. It's not a great celebration. And we just want to bring this to you so you could be encouraged and you could be edified by these brothers. They're entrepreneurs, they're authors, some are pastors, some are ministers, and a lot of them, pretty much all of them except me, are fathers. And so I want you guys to hear their story. And I have a gentleman that you're going to hear from. This man is a powerful man of God. No further ado. His name is Antonio Mclemore, and he's going to introduce himself.
Hey, how's everybody doing? My name is Antonio Mclemore, and I'm a firm believer that what we fail to honor, we lose. And I just want to give your roses to you, Jordan, for not only your vision, but I think to be surrounded around so many great men who all have perspectives, I think have a lens, whether it's their own personal lens. I'm just honored to be here. Jordan, I want to also affirm you in the reality that although you may not be a father, like a biological father, I think in a lot of ways you're a father in the faith. And so I just want to commend you for the work that you're doing. Really, when we're talking about fatherhood and really the importance of fatherhood, not only from like a scriptural standpoint, but just very like on a very practical level, this is something that I'm passionate about, something that I have an affinity to. Growing up with my father not being around, dad's a good dude, but just was not an active father. I'll never forget, this is maybe 4 or 5 years ago. A friend of mine had encouraged me. He asked me if I had a mission statement, and I'm like, what is that? I guess I knew what a mission statement, but he asked me if I had a personal mission statement. And so he gave me a challenge to start with 100 words. And then I called him. I said, I got 100 words. He said, now work your way down to 50 words. So then I worked my way down 50 words, and then got down to 25, and then I got down to 10. And he said, write a sentence. And he's like, and I want you to identify some of those words that you have left there that really speak to you. And one of the words was father. And so what I wrote down as my personal mission statement, and it's what wakes me up in the morning. It's what gives me life. No matter how things are going, whether things are going well I'm also a husband. So if things are going well between my wife and I, or as a father, I always go to sleep and wake up in the morning asking myself, beyond those things, how have I done as it pertains to being a father to the fatherless and to fight to make fathers relevant? That is really my assignment. It's why I'm here. It's why I exist. I've heard someone say that the two greatest moments in our life is the moment we're born. And then the second is the moment that we discover why. And my why is really to be a father to the fatherless and to fight to make fathers relevant. I mean, not only in my own personal experiences, but doing a lot of the work that I do with like engagement and involvement with engaging young men and women, specifically students of color. You find that there is a narrative that's a consensus where a lot of our young people, and even honestly, even our white brothers and sisters, don't have active fathers, right? Because there's a difference between having a father in the home and having an active father. And so my minor's in sociology, and so the data tells us that you have a higher dropout rate, prison, someone dropping out of high school, someone going to prison, someone doing criminal activity, like literally even down to someone's brain development when a father is not active in the home. There are all these things that follow the brokenness of not having a father in the home. So I really feel like this is my assignment, whether it be just speaking or just empowering other fathers or being a father to my community, or just, creating a platform, I think, to honor other fathers. So that's really kind of my introduction. It's funny. I was thinking about this because my title is an entrepreneur, but I'm in full-time ministry. I work for the Tacoma Urban League as a program manager for the male involvement program. Dr. Gaines and I also run Push for Leadership Academy. So if any principals or teachers, educators on this call, and you're looking for ways to engage with your students, we focus on mentorship. Hit us up. That's a seamless plug right there. And I also focus on specifically racial identity development. I run a program in Fife High School school district where it's called Young Black Entrepreneur. So we just focus on just leadership development and understanding our brand as it relates to the African American diaspora. And next.
Hey man, thank you, bro, for sharing that. Next up is my man Cliff. He's gonna share with you guys and speak life to you.
All right. How's everybody doing today? Just saying thank you to everybody, Jordan and everybody here. So I've been asked to give a little testimony about my father, what I've experienced with fatherhood and stuff. So I'm going to go all the way back. So at 6 months, actually, my biological father was killed. It was a case of mistaken identity, and the cops were chasing him, I guess, and he ran out into the street and he got hit by a car. By the time he got to the hospital, he was gone. He had passed away. So from about 6 years old to 11, I didn't have a father at all. Okay. My mom did her best to raise me. She did raise me with principles and things of that nature. However, because she had to work a lot, I got left with various babysitters. All right. And during that time, honestly, there's some things that happened to me. Sexually assaulted. I was bullied. At some point, I was tortured, so when I grew up, my whole masculinity or that confidence thing that men have was totally obliterated. It was gone. So I was really kind of lost. And I had male mentors, but they weren't consistent. So I had a picture of what being a man is, and how a father's supposed to teach you what a man is. I had a picture of it, but I couldn't grasp it. You know what I'm saying? So I kind of struggled with that. And I wasn't popular in school. I was the nerd. I was no confidence, no nothing. I'd get bullied, everything. Until about 11 years old, my mom met this guy, and he's the one I consider my dad, my dad. And he was like the total opposite. He was like the alpha dog, alpha male. I mean, he was the guy. He was the masculine, super masculine guy. So he had his work cut out for me, with me. But as I continued, and we butted head at first, you know, I wanted him to be my dad, but at the same time, I wasn't used to the authority of a male. You know, I was used to my mom, you know, and moms will get on you, but they're also kind of soft, you know. And I was real spoiled too, because I was the only grandchild at the time. I was the only grandchild, but I was the first one. And since my dad had died, he was the first male. I was the first grandchild. So of course my grandmother and my whole family was like all over me. So I got spoiled a lot. So you can imagine what that type of attitude does. Okay. So my dad had his work cut out for me. But, you know, over time we learned how to get along and stuff. And then as I grew up with him, and he wasn't perfect, as I grew up with him, I learned to have a greater appreciation for what he was teaching. That's really signifies today. In fact, Father's Day, I went back and told him, I said, hey, I really thanked him, because I said I could have turned out like this. And, you know, so we did have our struggles with each other, but he kind of taught me about being a father or man with that, something that's like I said, he wasn't always, because there was a period where he left for work. So he was gone for a long time. And at that time, though, my sister came into the picture. You know, I have a stepsister, but I consider her my real sister. And during that time, you know, I helped to raise her. I basically was the only male influence she had. So I kind of like raised her. She kind of considers me like a dad figure. But that kind of, you know, matured me, grew me up a little bit, and just applied the principles he had been teaching me and stuff like that. So like I said, my dad, him being in my life kind of turned things around for me a little bit. But I still have to walk out the pain of what happened, you know, when he wasn't there, you know. And it was to the point where, you know, I had to learn how through Christ to forgive the people that did that stuff. Now I still have to walk with it. I mean, I still have to deal with it, but I give it to God. You know, I give it to God, and God slowly helps me. And when I look back, I've noticed that, you know, God has always sent somebody to help me, you know, some male to help me, you know, when I look back. So that's pretty much, like I said, my experience, my little quick testimony. So yeah, that's it for right now.
Good work, Cliff.
And thank you for sharing. That was powerful, man.
Powerful.
Hey man, Cliff, thank you, man, for opening up in that way, man, to engage these people. Up next, one of my close friends, his name is Brian. We're gonna bring him on here real quick. What's good?
All right, praise the Lord, everyone. So my name is Brian Bentley. My little backstory is that I'm the youngest of 4 kids. My mom actually divorced my dad because he was basically a liar and a thief. And he continued to bring stolen stuff home, and she just didn't want her kids around it. So she divorced my dad. I was 4 years old. I have no recollection of what it was like for my dad to ever be around. We were living in the projects for a while, and then she bought. Well, my mom's only job she ever had before she divorced my dad was babysitting. So she went from babysitting to basically trying to get a job to, you know, eventually buying a house. And we lived about 2 blocks outside of Holly Park. Saw my dad probably about 6 times from the time I was 5 years old to the time I was 8. So I eventually started having a lot of resentment for him not being around. I remember calling him in 5th grade and asking him to attend the father and son picnic at the school I was going to. And he assured me that if I showed up, he would be there with me. And the embarrassment of being the only son whose father is not there at the father and son picnic. Thankfully, there's a Caucasian gentleman and his son, one of my classmates, who insisted that I participate with them until my dad got there. Just that walk home, I was basically in denial about where my dad was. You know, oh, he must have gotten into a car accident or something. You know, something had came up. There was a good reason for him not being there. Fast forward till I'm 25 years old, and I'm at my cousin's house, and my uncle says to me, "Hey, I'm going to go see your dad today." When's the last time? My cousins are like, "Hey, when's the last time you seen your dad?" I said, "I haven't seen my dad since I was 8 years old." And they're like, "Man, you should go." I really didn't want to see him. I felt like he knew I was around, and he never made any effort to be in my life. So why should I waste the time to go and see him? But my uncle and my cousins persuaded me to go with my sister and her kids. My sister drove. We get to my dad's house, and he's at the store. He comes in from the store. My sister greets him with daddy, and I'm looking at him, and my uncle says to him, "Hey, there's Brian." My dad looks over at me and says, "Hi, Brian." I'm like, "Hey, how you doing?" And my uncle says to him again, "Hey, man, that's Brian." And he said, "I said hi to him." He goes, "Man, dude, that's your son, Brian." And I'll never forget the look on his face when my dad looked at me and said, "I have a son named Brian." And I was like, I can't believe it. You know, I just can't believe this guy forgot he had a son named Brian, man. And I rode with my sister, so I was stuck there for another 2 hours. So all the pain, all the resentment, all the anger that I felt toward this man, it came back because I felt like this guy, he only cares about himself. I'm 100% insignificant to this man. So we left. He came over afterwards and tried to put his arm around me and say, "Hey, buddy, how's it going?" But I heard your conversation. I heard you looked at me and said you didn't remember you had a son named Brian, which was to me was devastating. And in all honesty, I felt like my dad died on that day. That was just something that I was like, how I didn't think I could overcome it. So then I have children. I had a child, and so in my life, I was constantly trying to overcompensate and just prove that I'm not going to be like my dad. You know, I'm going to be a good father. So I was constantly trying to do more and more for my children because my motivation would be no one was ever going to be able to look at me and say Brian is like his dad. So I was constantly doing things, and God was just started dealing with my heart, and God said to me, "You need to forgive him." And I was in a church service a couple years before, and they were praying, and they said, "We can't move on because someone has unforgiveness in their heart." And I was like, man, whoever it is, I hope they, forgive so we can move on with the service. And God said to me, "Brian, it's you." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "You haven't forgiven your dad." So I gave it to God, and this was like 2 years before. But when I saw him and I realized that he didn't remember me, it was like a relapse. All that bitterness, all that anger, everything came back, and I struggled with it for years. I thought once I became a dad that I would be good, but the pain of the decisions that my father made of choosing not to be in my life, I didn't realize how they were affecting me. Basically, the only one I have expectations for is God. I've lived my life from the time I was in 5th grade, that day he stood me up at my father-son picnic, that I decided that day I'd never expect anything from anyone. That way I couldn't be disappointed. And it's tough being in situations and you have zero expectations at anybody. It's not a good way to live your life. So fast forward, I'm 24 years old, Black man with daddy issues. I end up marrying a Black woman who grew up without a dad as well. So two people with daddy issues who don't realize they have daddy issues. And so, you know, we're married 19 years, end up getting divorced, and we're dealing with, you know, trying to be a part-time dad with 49% custody, right? And the struggle of a woman who grows up without a dad sometimes doesn't understand the importance of the dad because she never had one. So that's a whole nother topic within itself. Unfortunately, my dad passed away when I was 27. So I never had the opportunity to go to my dad and say, Dad, I forgive you for not being there for you. You know, that pain, that resentment, that anger that I carried for so many years that I used as motivation, it no longer has power over me because I've let it go. God has healed me. And now I'm able to love my kids and be the best father I can to them, not because I don't want to be by my dad, like my dad, because God gave them to me and he put them under my charge, and I need to be the best man I can be for them. So no matter what your situation is in life and what you've gone through in terms of a parent, it's never too late to be healed and to positively impact those around you. Thank you for your time, Jordan. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. That was a powerful testimony and story from my brother Brian. Just his transparency and opening up on some of the things that he's faced. I've actually heard bits and pieces of his story that has encouraged me. But I wanted to introduce you guys to somebody as well. He's going to share and open up his heart and introduce himself.
Blessings, everybody. My name is Jared Miller, and I'm 32 years old. I'm the father of twins, boy and girl. They will be 11 years old this year, you know, and so became a father, you know, at the age of 21. And I just knew, you know, from the time I was a kid that I wanted to be a father. And I think a part of that really stemmed from the fact that, like, you know, my father wasn't there. So I kind of had this point I wanted to prove, like, hey, my dad wasn't there for me, but, you know, I have children and I'll be a much better man than he ever was to me. And so with that being said, you know, I didn't know my dad like at all. Like, he was never in the picture from what I can remember. I remember stories about how he picked out a name for me, you know, so if it wasn't for, you know, some wise uncles that I have, I appreciate y'all for that. You know, my name would have been Pierre Tremaine instead of Jared Rashad. And so that Pierre Tremaine was going to be the name that my father had chose for me, but he was never there to begin with. So ultimately that was just nixed. And so from what I heard that my dad was like, you know, into drugs or whatever. And when I got older, like more like in high school, you know, I started looking up things online. I seen on his, I was able to find him on the Illinois Department of Corrections. And so that's the first picture that I ever had of him. And so for me, like I said, I didn't have any pictures of him hanging around the house. The only time he was talked about was when it was something negative. It was never anything positive. I was always told that he was just no good. And so for me, I thought, okay, cool. Well, it's good that he wasn't in my life, but deep down, I always wondered, because with me, I'm the second born of 5 children. And so, my mother had different fathers, you know, so all of my siblings, we all have different fathers. And so for the most part, you know, the rest of my siblings had their family around, like their father's side of the family, whether if it was grandmothers or cousins or aunties or something like that, you know, they would come and pick them up for the weekends or something. But for me, that was never the case. Like I never had anyone from my father's side of the family come and see about me. So for me, I was very close to my mom. I was a mama's boy, you know, and so still am to this day deep down, you know, but we're gonna keep that in the law. No, but my mom kept me real close, and I was raised by her, and I was raised by my grandmother as well. So, you know, they instilled in me, you know, Christian principles and things like that, prayer, you know, and all of that. And so as a young boy, I had a lot of anger, you know, just because, you know, my dad wasn't in the picture. And I remember just going to my grandmother's bathroom, and I just cry out to God, like, why isn't my dad around, you know? And so with that being said, You know, I was in elementary school, and I remember during this time, this is like the late 90s. During this time, certain rap groups were coming out like Cash Money and No Limit and, you know, Rough Riders and all this stuff. And so for me, I'm seeing these guys on BET, and I'm looking at these guys, they have one of these black hoodies and gold grills and chains and all this other stuff with the big baggy clothes. And so I felt like, oh, okay, that's what a man looks like, you know? And so I started seeing these men like that looked like that lived right around the corner from me. Little did I know at the time, these guys were gang members and drug dealers, you know, but I looked up to them because I felt like they looked cool. You know, they had the nice Jordans and the nice clothes. And so I was around them and I looked up to them. And actually, I even witnessed one get shot. Like I was in my bedroom, my sister's bedroom, and it was a rainy day. I'll never forget it. He's standing on the corner, and I see this raggedy car just pull up, and he shoots this guy. You know, the guy lived, and I actually ended up being able to talk to him just some years later, when I became an adult. And I told him that I remembered him from when I was a boy, and he also remembered me as well. And so I told him that back then I looked up to him, but now he actually told me that he looks up to me now, me being in Christ, in which that in itself, like the fact that I'm even in Christ is not of my own doing. I didn't want anything to do with Christ. So even though I grew up in a Christian home, I didn't want anything to do with Jesus. When I was 19 years old, my first tattoo was outlaw. I didn't want anything to do with Christ. I knew that if I was to surrender my life to Christ, that I would have to repent and turn away from my sin. And I did not want to do that. You know, and so I was in rebellion against the Lord until he just captivated my heart. And so just with that being said, when these things happened, I remember just as a young boy, I was probably, just to backtrack a little bit, I was about maybe 12. I was in 6th grade. I know that for sure. And that's when the first time I ever laid eyes on my dad. Mind you, like I just said, I didn't have any picture of him, so I had no idea what he looked like. So I was expecting him to look like the guys on the rap videos. So when I seen him and he didn't look like that with the iced out jewelry and the big old jersey clothes and all these other fancy clothes, I didn't see him looking like that. So I was a bit let down. You know, I actually was a bit disappointed because I'm like, oh man, he's not what I expected, you know. But I had some questions for him. I wrestled with some things. I saw him. So again, I'm about 12, 13 at this time. I didn't see him again until I was about 14. And he was like right across the street from me. And then I didn't see him again until I was 21. So 7 whole years went by where I didn't see my father until I was 21 years old when my children were born. And so, and now I haven't seen him again since, you know, and I'm 32. And so between that time, you know, we've talked, you know, I've talked with him on Marco Polo, just trying to I wanted to actually, him and I wanted us to get together to see each other so he could see his grandchildren and spend some time with our family. That was supposed to be as of last year. Well, he let me down, and that didn't happen. And so that actually was a big disappointment for me. So I'm kind of in a place right now where I'm just like processing whether if I even want to reach out to him again. So Jordan, man, thank you again for even allowing this opportunity to even have us speak on this, because I didn't think that I would ever really be comfortable with like openly speaking about this, you know, but the Lord used you, bro. And so I'm thankful. I appreciate this. And thank you all for listening.
Hey, absolutely, man. That man kept it real. Yeah, Jared, you did a phenomenal job just sharing. All right, the next speaker is actually myself, and I'm just gonna go ahead and just share my story with you guys. I grew up in Seattle, and you know, in terms of with my father, you know what I mean. I don't have any memories, childhood memories with my dad. He was gone for till I was about 10 years old, and he left me and my older brother and my mom when I was a little kid. I don't even remember when he left. But something that hit me during that journey without having my dad there was just kind of like, I guess, just a lot of anger. I grew up with a lot of anger. I was like bullying kids. I got expelled from like 2 elementary schools growing up. I was running reckless. And I remember my stepdad, he came into my life around like 7 or 8. And he was there, but not as active as I wanted him to be when I look back. And but with my real dad, I didn't have a good relationship with him. I don't have a, I have a relationship with my dad now by the grace of God, but I'm not as close as I want to be with him. I think through similar to a lot of my brothers, there's been like a lot of rejection, and I had to like fight through that to try to build and desire that relationship even more. So the point of even having this conference is really birthed out of not having my dad in my life, and also processing through my stuff that I've encountered with not having my dad around. I think one of the most hurtful moments growing up for me, just to be real, was probably like my sophomore year going to my junior year. I played basketball ever since I was 6. So a lot of things started to take off for me in terms of basketball, and my name started to get around different parts of the cities. And my dad heard my name through somebody else in a barbershop, and he was like, "That's my son." And he started to gravitate towards me my junior year. That's when I started to really like take off, and I was taking advantage of basketball in terms of training and everything, so I was getting better. And he really wanted a piece of that. There's still things that linger that makes me want to talk to him why he wanted to come back in my life during that point in time. If I'm honest, I didn't even really care about the basketball at that point. I did care about basketball. I love basketball, but I didn't care at that point in that moment because he was there. And there was something still in me longing to be with him, to be called out by him, to be affirmed by him, to have a sense of, not pride in a bad way, but a sense of pride, by carrying his last name. I still carry his last name. But I think through that time of playing basketball and different opportunities to play college ball, he wasn't really there for me even after, with college games and stuff like that. And so I really don't have a ton of memories with him, and that really like, brought a lot of hurt in my life, also in my older brother's life. My older brother, he started, he was kicked out of the house when he was 16. He was in gangs and stuff like that. And so I kind of went in a different direction because I really fell in love with basketball. That's what really kept me. And besides, of course, of following God. But I think growing up with my father has left a lot of wounds inside of me that has caused me to really cave in, really be quiet in certain aspects of things that have hurt me. But I think through following God and also other people in my life, they've caused me to open up and become more transparent. And I believe as we become more transparent as men of God and as men, we can work through some of the things that we've experienced. And so that's a little bit about me in terms of, my father wounds, so to speak, and things that I've encountered with not having my dad in my life. And I remember this one time, I didn't realize how it affected me. I remember in 2015, I won't go into detail, but something happened my last year at college. I got in some deep trouble. And I didn't say this. I wasn't planning on saying this for manipulation or anything. It surprised me. So I was sitting down with one of my mentors at a school that I was at, and he took me out to lunch. And anyway, I started processing some of the things that I was going through and things that I did. And I'll never forget it. I stood up like this and I was like, man, if my dad was in my life, this would have never happened. Now, of course, I accept for a lot of the things that I've done. I don't want to just throw it on my dad all the time. But in that moment, I knew there was a problem. That was the root thing. There was a problem. There was an issue. There was something that I didn't realize that I was hurting from. And when I did that, I stood back like this, and it scared me because I was like, what is that? And so I kind of processed that a lot through, with God and with other people. It didn't happen right away, but it definitely hit me a lot pertaining to that. But I wanted to share that with you guys because, a lot of times we don't open up as men, and we don't see the representation of men, and we think masculinity is, don't cry, keep all your emotions in, everything you're going through, just keep it to yourself. don't be a punk, just hold it in. That's what real men do. And that's not the case. You have to release your emotions. You have to be transparent with the things that are affecting you so you can process through with what God is trying to do in you. So I wanted to share our last speaker. And if you guys have any questions throughout tonight, we will tackle that. We're going to do a Q&A after our last speaker, and he's going to introduce himself and speak to you guys on this matter.
I'm excited to be here, Jordan. Thank you so much. It's been a powerful night. There's really not much left that needs to be said, but I just want to share a little bit of my story with the hope of just encouraging someone. And I'm so encouraged tonight by all of your stories and just the tools and the advice that you have given. I want to preface with a book that I read when I was a sophomore in college. As we talk about this idea of fatherlessness, I remember being in college. I was a sophomore in college, and a mentor of mine gave me a book. He always used to tell me that I was a diamond in the rough. And he would say, there's things you need to do to become that diamond that you were created to be. He was a pastor at a prominent church in Sacramento. He gave me this book, and this book was just all about being offended and forgiveness and how to forgive people and why it's important to forgive people. And I remember in this book, it had two categories, how it kind of identified people. It was those who were treated unjustly and those who believe that they were treated unjustly. And I remember reading this book, and it literally pierced my heart, because what I realized through reading this book, I was holding on to so much anger. The fruit of offense and the fruit of just not forgiving is hurt, anger, outrage, jealousy. And I was holding on to all of that. This is what I believe about just not forgiving people. If we don't forgive, it's almost like something is holding us back. It was like the weight of the world was on my shoulders, pushing me down, right? Forgiveness is something that we think we're holding on to, but it's actually holding on to us. And these were lessons that I learned through this book. And through this book, I realized that although my father wasn't in my life, my father was just repeating the cycle that he saw from his father. And I guarantee you, his father was repeating the cycle that he saw from his father. My father abandoned us when I was young, after my mother passed away. And he didn't abandon us because he was like, I'm just going to give up on my family. Like I said, he just was a part of a cycle that he couldn't break. I talked to my father throughout the years, always had love for my father, and I craved a relationship. But I remember reading this book. I didn't call my father for him. I called my father when I was a sophomore in college after reading this book for me, because it's when my growth journey started. My journey in the faith started. I believe real growth happens when we learn and realize that we have to check on ourselves, when we learn how to check on ourselves, right? And so I really wanted to grow, and growth is so uncomfortable, but my biggest opportunity to grow was right in that uncomfortable zone. So I called my father and I said, Dad, it was like 3 a.m. and I was crying, and I said, Dad, I love you. And I want you to know that I forgive you. And my father, on the other end of the line, he began to cry, and he said, I love you too. And I said, Dad, if I ever hurt you, I hope and pray that you can forgive me as well. And that was one of the best moments, literally, of my life. Because in that moment, I remember feeling like I could go on. I remember feeling like that pressure that I was feeling my whole life was gone. I had so much internal peace. I began to feel, I talked about the fruit of like offense, but I began to feel the fruit of the Spirit. I began to feel love for the first time. I began to feel kindness for the first time. I began to feel gentleness for the first time. And so fast forward, about 5 years after that conversation, I graduated from college. I moved back home. I bought a duplex in Tacoma, Washington. And I called my dad, and he lived in Iowa at the time. And my dad, we began to talk, and my father came to my college graduation. And we just had a really good relationship. I called my father because I believe my forgiveness needed to become action, right? I believe just love in its purest form is forgiveness. And I love my father, but I wanted that to become action, not just for me, but I wanted my family to see it. I wanted my other siblings to see it. I wanted my community to see it. And so I called my father, said, Dad, it's time that you move back home. And so for 5 years, my father lived with me in this duplex, and he became my best friend. I remember one of the best days of my life. My father looked at me in the eyes with tears in his eyes. He said, John, I'm proud of you. And to hear that as a man, that's why I tell every young man that I mentor that I'm proud of them, because to hear that as a man, it absolutely changed my life, realizing, understanding that my father was proud of me. This man that I thought just didn't love me and left me. He always loved me, but like I said, he was part of a cycle. A couple years ago, unfortunately, my father, and I'll close with this. A couple years ago, my father, about 3 years ago, he was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. And I was planning my wedding. I was just trying to do my thing in the community. I was speaking, I was traveling, working in corporate America at the time. And my father was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. And I remember getting that call and his doctor telling me he had 3 to 6 months to live. I remember walking into my father's room. He looked at me with tears in his eyes. He says, John, I need you to be strong. He said, John, I need you to be strong. I realized in that moment, I just want to serve my father and love my father. So I became his main care provider for almost a year. My father passed away a day after my birthday. We buried him 3 days before my wedding. But the reason why I have so much joy is because I made that call as this immature sophomore in college. The reason why I have so much joy today is because the Spirit of God used me as a testimony of the power of what his son, Jesus Christ, did through the cross. I knew that I can overcome. I knew that I could forgive. And I honestly am who I am today, the father, the husband, because I had that conversation with my father. And I'll just close with this. The reason why I decided to forgive my father was, one, because I knew one day I would have a daughter or a son, and I knew one day they would ask about their grandfather. And I wanted to tell them that, one, either I forgave them and he chose not to have a relationship with me, or two, I forgave him and your grandfather became my best friend. And so I have a great story to share with my daughter, and she's going to know that her grandfather overcame and fought hard to be in my life as well. So that's my story.
Hey man, that was so good, John. I thank you so much, bro, for sharing that, bro. Right now we're going to transition into a Q&A session. We got one question, but that's not going to stop us to dialogue and chop it up. I wanted you guys to see all of us as we speak, and really dive into some of these questions. So if you guys have any questions while we're talking, go ahead and drop the questions in the comment section, or you can DM me or any of the speakers, and we'll get to your questions. And if you want us to keep it confidential where we don't mention your name, so just let us know that. But leave your questions below, and we'll answer some of you guys' questions. So I got a first question for you guys. Any of you guys can tackle it. It's not for any specific person. Is the motivation of, this is my brother Marquise, he asked this, is the motivation of being better than our dads just to prove ourselves, in a sense, whether they were in our lives or not? Is that really healthy? Does that make sense? Yeah. Anybody can talk on that. Antonio, it looked like you want to jump it.
Yeah, I think this is my narrative, because if the goal is only to, literally, Jordan and I did, had a conversation where we conversed about, fatherlessness about a month ago, and my dad and our relationship's a work in progress, and my dad says, and his narrative has been for as long as him and I have started this conversation, is, well, Antonio, I'm a better father than my dad was. Like, you don't understand. Like, my grandfather left my dad's family. My dad has 4 siblings. There's 4 of them. Left them when my dad was 10 years old. So left, started a new family. My dad was like, I didn't see my dad. And the only reason why he came back around is because I had to pursue him. And so like my story with my father is when my mom got pregnant with my dad, and there's a lot of, things behind, like what happened, but essentially my mom and my dad weren't together. My dad didn't necessarily want to be a husband. He didn't want to be a father in that time. And so my mom ended up moving to Washington. So I was born in California. My mom ended up moving to Washington, and I didn't meet my dad until I was 5 years old. And then from that point, he became the summertime father, right? So I see him, 5, 6 weeks, 7 weeks in the summer, and then I'll go back home. My mom raised me. And so a lot of my narrative is not necessarily that like my dad was a bad dude, it's that he wasn't present. And so him and I got into the dialogue where he was like, Antonio, like, you can't say I wasn't there. I'm like, Dad, you can't claim 7 out of the 52 weeks of the year and give yourself a pat on the back because you're better than your father. Because what I begin to tell him is that I think regardless of the generation that's gone before you, I said, from a biblical standpoint, the Bible is very clear about our standard. And so just because I think sometimes in society we set the bar so low because we say, well, I'm better than my dad, or I'm better than he was. And my brothers and I, we all have different fathers. And so 4 brothers, we all have different dads. And so my dad was like, I was a better father than them, which is true. I said, but if you're comparing yourself to my oldest brother's never met his dad. So if that's your comparison, at the end of the day, I think we're still not meeting the biblical narrative or the biblical responsibility of men, of fathers being present in their children. Because let me tell you why. Because I think it's consequential that we understand that so much of, especially for young males, obviously this is true for women too, for our young queens, but for men specifically, we identify our model from our fathers. So much of who we are is the standard that our fathers establish or walk out or model in front of us. Let me give you an example. The Bible talks about, the Pharisees came to Jesus and they said, tell us on what authority that you do these things. Tell us why, who gave the authority? And Jesus's response is, well, my mama, Mary. No, he didn't say that. He says, I just do what I saw my Father in heaven do. Colossians 3:1 says that we should be focused and fixed not on the realities of this earth, but we should be fixed on the realities of heaven. So this idea that what I see is who I can become. And so I have to share another, I promise. I'm talking about wounds, but I also want to talk about like absentee father, right? So I was talking to my father-in-law. He's African. So my wife is African, and her family from Zimbabwe. And so, my father-in-law was in town. He was kind of talking about and even complaining about my brother-in-law. He's like, he's always complaining, saying I wasn't there, wasn't present. He says, but, I'm from Africa, and, there are people who come from hard stuff and hard experiences. He's like, people who make it in spite of their father not being present. So essentially he needs to stop whining. And so I just let him talk for about an hour. And then finally I kind of like jump into the conversation. And I say, let me ask you a question. When your father stepped away from your life, what happened? He said, well, my uncles and cousins and basically the older men in the community and his family tribe, they basically all stood up to be a father. I said, let me tell you what happens for an African-American male in this society when their fathers step away. I said, do you know who steps up to be a father? Michael Jordan and Tupac raise your children. The streets raise your children. The gangbangers raise your children. If the fathers step away, oftentimes it's BET or it's whatever public figure that ends up raising our father. And he was like, I understand, right? So I think it's so powerful that we understand that what happens when fathers step away, we typically, especially in the African-American community, there's not a bunch of access of fathers that are willing to step into the gap or step into, the fire. I think the other thing too that I want to address my last thing, is wounds. One of the things that we all have been talking about is wounds. And I think what's interesting is there's probably people that are watching this, just like myself, where I was not aware of the wound that the absentee or my not having a father there. I didn't realize the depths of the wound until I was 22 years old. I'm writing a sociology paper, a minor in sociology, and it's talking about the roles of a father. And I'm writing this paper and I start crying. I'm just like bawling my eyes out. And I don't even know why I'm crying. And I'm like, hold on. Like, and I realized at that moment that I had these wounds, right? So that was like the first moment for me. And then I'll never forget, I was full-time ministry, literally standing in the line about to get some food. My spiritual father walks past me and he kisses me on the head. Doesn't say nothing to me. He just kissed me on the head. And I'm telling you, I start bawling, like I break down and start crying. Literally, like the cashier's looking at me like, are you okay? Is something wrong with you? Did you lose your wallet? It's okay. Just have it. Take it for free. Like, just have it. Like, it's okay. And I'm like, and I remember thinking in that moment on how, like, the depths of the wound. And I think one of the things that I think is consequential for us as men is that we learn to identify the wound. Like, we can't keep saying to ourselves that we're good, we got it all together. Like, we have to be willing to address the wound. And my mentor told me this is the last thing I'll say, promise. My mentor said, Antonio, when his father stepped away at the age of 13, he said, if I would have waited for my father to come back into my life, I would be a 50-year-old, 13-year-old. He said, so at the age of 13, I stopped trying to put my father in a position that I knew he couldn't fulfill. And I went and found a mentor, I went and found someone who could provide those, whether it be mentorship or that fatherly role. So I think that's why this conversation is so consequential, because this is where mentorship is so critical for our community as well.
Hey, beautiful, man, beautiful.
Sorry
Hey, John, go ahead and ask that question that was asked.
Yep. So, I think that's a good transition because a question came through. So, what about those that never had a father available? And Antonio answered that question. He shared who would be up to raising your son, TV, rappers, athletes, right? Or these absent father homes, right? And so statistics show us, like what Jordan mentioned, 65 to 70% of African American boys grow up in an absent father home, right? And so, what about those who never had a father available? The reason why I have my doctorate is because I strive to mentor young men. I wrote my dissertation on mentorship, and I believe the answer to that question, what Antonio touched on, is mentorship. Because although my father wasn't present, my brother stepped in. Although my father wasn't present, I had great mentors. And so when young men ask me, how did you become who you are today? Who did you learn from about being a man? Mentors, my brothers, phenomenal men in the community that I sought guidance from. And so I think that's the short answer to that question. And mentorship is so important. And I think everyone on this call and men that are watching, we have, it's not an opportunity. I believe it's an obligation to pull young men up and mentor young men.
Yeah, man, I think just to tag on what you're saying, I think also I think in the church and also in the world, the culture, I think we're lacking that with the mentorship and discipleship and really walking with young men through their process. I'm reminded of somebody. I'm gonna try to keep this short because I want to be mindful of time. But I'm reminded of somebody, even though that we don't agree with this person and what they taught. But there's this guy his name is Elijah Muhammad, and he was the leader of he was one of the main leaders of the Nation of Islam. What blows me away was that although obviously doctrinally we wouldn't agree in terms of the Bible, but what was amazing was he would walk with people that were in prison or people that were down and out off of the streets. And the biggest key that I realized, he was just being a father figure. He was sending letters to Malcolm X when he was in prison. And when Malcolm X got out of prison, obviously he was one of his followers. I remember John, I called John about 2-3 years ago. I don't know if John remembers this, but me and John were chopping it up, and he was just talking about how some of the gangs in Tacoma, Washington were, buying pizza for the middle schoolers and elementary kids. And then they would join the gang. And it's the simple things like that that can open the doors for us men, especially older men, to pour into these young men that are coming up. And I think that we're so focused on different things as opposed to these young men out here that's really in a vulnerable place that the enemy attacks. So I think that's key, bro.
Yeah, man. Real quick, and I just wanted to speak to the gang influence because that's something that I didn't really mention in my story. Like I said, I grew up in the hood, like, you know, surrounded with gangs, you know, and drug dealing and things like that. And so that actually enticed me. You know, I'm a tall dude, you know. So Jordan, I know you was a baller. I'm a tall dude. I'm like almost 6'6", you know, and like I didn't put that height to use. I could have, and I know that my mom, she really pushed me, but it's like the streets was pulling me more because I felt like, you know, I was seeking that affirmation that I wanted from a male. You know, like I said, I had women, I had my mother and I had my grandmother. They did their best, like Cliff said. You know, like my mother, my grandmother did the best that they could. But a male still needs that male presence in their life, someone that's going to say, "I'm proud of you," like, you know, like John said, like, you know, just someone telling you, like, I'm proud of you, keep going, and encouraging you to go in the right direction, because there's so many people that are lost and misguided and everybody's going in the wrong direction. It's like Jesus said, like, you know, the blind leading the blind, they all fall into a ditch. And that's the gang life, because there's a whole bunch of misguided young boys seeking love and affirmation from one another. And that's why they call it a brotherhood, but it's they draw you in with that familial like feeling, but really the streets don't love you at all. If anything, they just take you from the ones that do. And I'm just thankful to God that I'm able to live to say that.
Yeah, that's good, man. That's so important. There was actually a question for John specifically. I don't know if you're able to see it, but yeah, bro, that's so important to know, especially for people that are growing up in that type of background. Jared. All right, the question for John is: was the healing of John instant, or was it a process for that being when he was called his father that night? Does that make sense? Was it healing?
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
All right.
it was a process. It took me a lot to get to that point. And at that time, Antonio was my roommate, right? And I remember, like, that week, even leading up to that, I bawled my eyes out listening to gospel music for 3, 4, 5, 6 hours. And Antonio can attest to this, right? And so it was a process. But once I decided to forgive him, this is my story. It was instant. For me, I felt like this overwhelming presence of peace, like all the anger, and that's when my story started. And so, because it takes a lot to get to that point, so I think there's a lot of things that happen up until that point. And so sometimes folks say, well, yeah, and maybe it changes for some folks. Sometimes they say, yeah, I forgave so and so, but they did it out of frustration, out of anger. They did it just to check a box. All the pruning and all the hurt, all the tears happened for the years leading up to that point. Sometimes folks, they read a book on forgiveness and they really don't go through some of that internal healing, and like, I'm just going to forgive them just to check the box, and they forgive him, like, why don't I feel better? Because you still have to go through that growth phase. It's a part of life. It's important, and that's what gets you to become everything God created you to be. And because I had so much anger and hurt and bitterness and envy and jealousy for most of my life, and I used that to fuel the fire, right? And so for me, that process just happened before that conversation. But once I forgave my father, it was instant. I was ready. Like, I told him that conversation, like, hey, one day I'm gonna move you back to Tacoma. I spoke that into existence, and it took a lot for me to say that, but I was healed.
Yeah, bro, that's powerful, bro. Especially, I mean, you being transparent. I think a lot of I'm not gonna say you know, reading books is a bad thing, because I know all of us do that at some point in time. But I think looking yourself in the mirror, so to speak, through that analogy, and really, really embracing those things that can be hindering you. Or I remember talking to Antonio, I never even thought of it like this, but it's almost like with the father wounds, I'm almost like I'm linking all over, like just like spilling out the things of my hurt, spilling out from things that were not given to me, like affirmation or, you know, physical touch, or my dad grabbing me saying, man, like, I love you despite this, that, and the third. And I think it's so important, you know, that we do that. You know what I mean? So does any of you guys have anything to say about that?
We had another question come through as well.
Okay, Cliff, we got a question for you, man. What's the question, John?
So the question, how do we as African American men and men in general find ourselves when your mother is in the church and your father is in the gang? And then the example, my father was in and out of prison and my mom's was heavily in the church. So how do we choose? You're on mute,
Okay,
brother.
I'm sorry about that. I was on mute. I want you to read that again because I want to make sure I got it in the proper context.
Of
So
course.
read that one more time.
How do we as African American men and men in general find ourselves when your mother is in the church and your father is in the gang? His father was in and out of prison and his mother was heavily in the church. So how does a person choose in that situation who to follow?
Okay. So in that case, of course, you want to follow those that are seeking the Christ, because at that church that your mom is at, I'm sure there has to be males there that will be willing to mentor. And let me tell you what I mean. Okay. Now, my father wasn't in the gang. He was, of course, like I said, my biological father was killed, but she was in the church at the time. So I went to one of the biggest churches in Tacoma back then, which was St. John. And they had a lot of men there. So I learned certain things following her in Christ. I learned a lot of things. I started learning about what men were about from those men at the church. So anytime you want to follow the individual that's following Christ, because Christ will lead you to where you need to be. And if it hadn't have been for that, all those men at the church kind of coming around me, you know, I would still have my issues and stuff, but it's like I got to kind of see what a man, you know, possibly was or should be. They had responsibilities, you know, they weren't perfect, of course, but, you know, I saw how they worked hard. They had responsibilities, discipline, things like that. I got that out of the church, out of the men from the church at the time. And I know it's kind of different now, because the church now seems to be a lot more women than men there, but there are men that in the church that will help in that regard. So I would, in that case, like I said, I would have followed the one, which was the mom, to church. And in that church, the Lord will provide you with that male influence that you need until some reconciliation can come between you and your father, possibly. Mm. But that's trusting in the Lord, man. And I'm not trying to make it a religious thing, but it's trusting in the Lord. That's a point where you gotta follow God, where God is taking you, as far as following your mom and trusting in Him, and He will heal your pain, and He will provide you with folks. Because, like I said, all of us here, we're at different stages of where we are at with our dads, but we're where we're at because of Christ, because of what He's been doing in us, because of following His will and Him talking. And there's a thing I want to say right quick, and, you know, with God, be honest with Him. You know, a lot of us, we're not really honest with God all the time. So if you're angry and stuff, talk to Him about it. You know, discuss that things with Him, because that's how you start dealing with it. And God will answer your prayer on that. God will hook you up. He will.
Amen. Amen.
Also, I hope that answers the question. I hope that yeah.
All right, bro. We all going on it. Jared, you want to share? Any of you guys want to share on that? Touch on that?
Can I just kind of tap in a little bit and I want to just kind of interject some thoughts on where Brother Cliff was talking about.
Yeah.
One of the things that I always try to encourage mothers, mamas, I was raised by a single mama, but my mom was always intentional about getting me in the space with men. And I think sometimes, and let me talk about, I'm a full-time pastor, so I think sometimes we just are so quick to drown our kids in these religious spaces, when if they're hurting, especially if they have a father that's engaging in criminal activity, that child's hurt. And at the end of the day, I would be more concerned about you getting someone in that child's life that's going to speak to their pain than just burying them in a space that's going to throw Bible scriptures at them. Because I remember being at church, a young man walked into church, and some kid walked in, and a bunch of men from the church, and they're like trying to get this kid to read the Bible. He's like, I don't even believe in none of this stuff. And I just thought to myself, like, nobody sat down for one moment to try to identify who this person is as a human being. Now, like I said, I'm just trying to add some perspective, because I think so much of when we're talking about like what God has for us, I think, God is all things to all people. I think there are people in my journey that helped me along my way that weren't all spiritual. Because I think ultimately, like my boys, right, their spiritual development is not going to come from the church. It's going to come from what I do in this household, right? So the reason why I read the Bible in my household and why I follow Jesus is because what my mama did in the household, not what she was doing in the church, right? Because young people are not going to follow what you say. They're going to do what you do. So if we at church and we praising God, but then we twerking on Saturday through Friday, right? Like they're just going to see a contradiction. So when my son comes in the morning and sees me praying on my floor, on my knees, right? That is what's reciprocating. So I just think it's important that we need to get our children around real, around authentic. All the guys around me they kind of were in process in their faith, but they were authentic. Yeah. And I think real is what reproduces real. Don't give me nothing. It's like, a lot of black mamas have, the fruit, it's the plastic fruit. I think sometimes we do that, right? It's like we portray this like finished product, but if you try to eat it, it's fake, it's hollow inside. So I think get your children around something that's authentic. The man doesn't have to be your husband, boo-boo. Just find a youth pastor, find somebody in the community who's doing the work and who is real. I got dudes that gangbang for real that will call me before they'll call any pastor or any leader. Why? Because I'll go and talk with them and chop it up. I'm not afraid, of their environment, and I affirm them as individuals. I think that's what Jesus was doing, not bringing nobody to church.
Yeah. And walking with people. I think with this question is very delicate. I don't, I think.
I agree.
I would say more so being wise about the question. And I thought Cliff did a phenomenal job. You did a great job. We're all adding something into to this question, because that's not a normal, like a normal basic type of question that would be asked in church, or you know what I mean? Like that's something that is not the norm in a lot of churches. So I think that's important that we talk about this. So Brian, I want you to talk on this as well, because I believe you have some perspective to share on this as well with that question.
What aspect of the question, Jordan?
Just the part where I'm assuming he's a young brother, young man that asked the question of when it comes to growing in a space, growing in a place where dad's not at home, he's living a different lifestyle. Then you got mom, and she's living a different lifestyle. You know what I mean? And so lifestyles are different. So she's going to church, and this other person, his dad is involved in gangs, in and out of prison. This young man's like, what lifestyle should I choose?
Yeah. When Me personally, I've always felt like the best lesson I've ever learned is learning from someone else's mistake. That you don't have to make the mistake that everyone else is making. If I saw a kid do something and get hurt, I said, I'm not going to do it because there's a very good chance that's going to happen to me. So in life, we have an opportunity to learn from other people's examples. If your dad is living a particular way and he finds himself in jail, there's a very good chance that if you do the same thing, you're going to have the same outcome that your father has. You know, my mom was in the church. I was raised Catholic, and unfortunate for me, I couldn't find the mentorship I needed in the church because the priest was trying to molest me. So I couldn't go to church. I had a desire to go to church. In third grade, I used to walk to church by myself 25 minutes if my mom didn't go to church. I'd walk by myself in third grade. That's just how much I was drawn to God at a young age. But unfortunately, we changed church, and the pastor would buy me new things to try to entice me to come to church. But once I got to church, he would say, I forgot I'm at home, come to my house. And I thank God for his grace because I never went over to his home. So we, as parents, we really have to be careful because, you know, we think these people in authority, you know, they're showing interest in your kid, and you just naturally assume they have your child's best interest at heart. And that's not always the case. We gotta, in our industry, say you gotta vet people, you know, and sometimes we're just too trusting of people in authority. And we'll allow our kids to be turned over to that Boy Scout leader, right? Or that swim coach. And we're not constantly following up on what's going on in our children's lives. And our children end up getting destroyed, you know, and then they end up having children that are end up destroyed. So I put a lot of ownership on the parent. You know, I know my son was into rap music. So I went out and bought Cross Movement, Grits. I bought all the Christian rap I could find. And I said, if he has a desire for this, I have to feed it. Because if I don't feed it, someone else is going to feed it. And if I can control, you know, what he gets, there's a better chance of, you know, him turning out better. And unfortunately, you know, when things didn't work out with me and his mom, he took a real bad turn with some of the decisions he was making, because I didn't have, unfortunately, I don't think I had full control over when you're a part-time dad. You know, you can impact the time you're with them, but when they're not there, there's not a whole lot you can do. So yeah, it's basically I was thankful that I had a spiritual father that I met when I was on like 19, and he completely changed my life. But yeah, you basically you know, I say for each individual, we all know someone who's doing the right thing, and you got to gravitate toward the one that is.
Yeah, man, I think that's really good. I think in this situation is definitely adding wisdom and wisdom to that perspective, especially for this young brother, because we don't know if he's a believer or not. So we don't. It's like I said, it's a very delicate, but it's definitely a doable situation of how to provide wisdom on that case. So I'm not going to touch on it on too much because we've already talked about it. Does anybody else have any questions that they got that they wanted to share with us? Okay. I wanted to, you know, respect you guys' time for this. So we're just gonna go ahead and end it now, unless you guys want to keep on going with different topics that are on your heart. Antonio?
I wanted to just kind of jump in. John was, you know, I think there was a question that was talking about healing. My brother David was talking about, you know, kind of alluded to his question.
Yeah.
One of the things that I would say that's powerful, one of the most powerful things that happened in my journey is I'll never forget, man, this is maybe like 6 years ago, or maybe, you know, 5-6 years ago, John Dr. John Gaines calls me and he says, bro, you need to forgive your dad. And I'm like, nah, bro, we're going back and forth and John, he was John then, he wasn't doctor. So he spoke my language, if you catch my drift. And he's like, nah, bro, you just need to go ahead and call your pops. And I remember it took like 6 months. Like, hey, you really need to like forgive your dad. You really need to let it go. And I felt like it was more than just me forgiving. I needed to apologize, which is like sort of a crazy concept, right? Because like when it's like, the victim apologizing to, the person who victimized them, right? And so I found myself, man, I told my wife, I'm like, babe, I just need to take 24 hours. I went to a hotel and I prayed, I was fasting. And I remember calling my dad on a Sunday morning and telling my dad, like, Dad, I apologize. Like, I forgive you, but I apologize for putting a standard on you that, you couldn't meet. And what was so crazy is like, now I had an expectation of how that conversation was going to go. So, here I am, I apologize to him and he's like, I'll be PC, but but like it was like, okay, that's, I mean, yeah, I forgive you, Antonio, and I think maybe like 5 or 6 months later, I think that was literally the process that started not only my healing, because I think so much of when we're talking about our wounds, it is really hard for us to embrace our power if we don't also embrace our pain. John talked about this, but what they say, unforgiveness is like the poison that we drink, expecting that it kills the other person. And I think it's so critical that we learn how to forgive, the people who've harmed us, or specifically our fathers, because I truly believe that it's fathers that we find the capacity for mentorship. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of share on that, and I'm grateful for John, right? Because if John didn't walk through his process of forgiving his father, he wouldn't have been able to speak to my reality. So I'm grateful. I think, when we have these conversations, I pray and hope that somebody listens to this and they say to themselves, man, shoot, I need to go talk to my pops.
Yeah. What you said right there towards the end, I mean, all of it was good, but it resonated with me towards the end when you were talking about, I think it's so vital. This is one of the reasons why I'm doing this, is because a lot of young men, also older men as well. I mean, I'm pretty sure he wouldn't mind me saying this, but my grandpa, he's about 70, 71, and he still deals with father wounds to this day. And so I think I was hearing a story by somebody that said by the age of like 12 or 13, they realized that their dad wasn't in their life. So they needed to reach out to other people to be around them, to help them through whatever they were facing, to learn, to be mentored or be guided along the way. And the reason, one of the main reasons why I'm doing this is to help this generation navigate through the whole father issues, whether your dad was in your life or he wasn't, you know what I mean? And a lot of our stories is kind of similar in a way, because our dad wasn't present, or maybe our dad was, and he, you know what I'm saying, and he wasn't active. And so I think it's important to walk with people through this, because not a lot of people know, you know what I mean? Not a lot of people know how to navigate through this stuff. Like, I'm still learning, and I think through us being transparent and opening up, it can help us further along the way. I would even say too, just certain things that have been helping me lately in my walk with Christ has definitely been the Book of John. Not Dr. John, but the Book of John. But the Book of John's been encouraging me, because you see Jesus talking to the Father. And just recently, like, no lie, like recently, I've been seeing that interaction take place as I was reading it. And it was really encouraging me, seeing Jesus talk to the Father. And I remember Dr. Tony Evans, he was talking to his daughter, and she had asked, what would you say to men or women that were growing up without their dad or had daddy issues? And he said, I would definitely tell them to start in the Book of John, read the Book of John. And and processing that with realizing that God is our Father, that really blew me away, that God doesn't want to just be my Lord and my Savior. He wants to be my Father. Because I think about Paul, when he's writing these letters to the churches, he's always saying God the Father. You know what I mean? He's always saying Father, Father, Father. And so I think that's so vital for a lot of people, especially for us men, to engage a relationship with Christ as our Father, and He wants to be there, provide for us, and guide us. So I think that's just important. John, did you have something?
I'll keep it short. Just
Yeah.
thinking about what Antonio shared, the unique thing about that story, I had met Antonio's father, and I remember just like, oh, he's a cool guy. He's a cool guy. But going back to even my father's story, I think oftentimes they're just part of like cycles, and what they see, they try to be a little better than that. And then fast forward, I'm texting Antonio because I do remember, and I'm the godfather of Antonio's son. And as I started thinking about my future and my vision, I thought, one, Antonio, because we hold each other accountable and we're able to have those tough conversations. I knew in order for him to be the best father that he could be, he had to take that step. He had to take that step. And two, I knew that Israel would appreciate having a relationship with his grandfather, which he does now. And he's going to know things, but he's going to know his grandfather as being his grandfather, flying here for birthdays and whatnot. He's been to birthdays, and that's one of the dopest things to see. And I can't have that for my daughter right now, right? Because my father passed away. And so I think it's important, one, to become everything that we were created to be. One, forgiveness to someone's watching us and they're struggling with that forgiveness. And two, to be the best fathers. I'm speaking to the men, to be the best fathers that we were created to be. That's a step that we have to take.
Good word, bro.
Yeah, that's a great word. I got another question for you guys that just dropped. How should young men go about seeking out mentorship if their fathers are not around? What advice would you give young men that are growing up without a father? I think, and a lot of you guys can talk about this, but something that I've observed from being fathered by spiritual fathers in my life, with my walk with God, and then also mentors that can walk with me, I've realized that the one of the primary roles as a man and as a father is to guide the children. And when the father is not there, how can this person guide this young kid? Now this kid has to guide themselves. How does an 8-year-old guide himself on finances? Or you know what I mean? They might be able to do something like that, but that's rare. You know what I'm saying? Like a lot of things, you don't know what you don't know. So how should young men go about seeking out mentorship if their fathers are not around? What advice would you give to that?
Man, can I touch on this just for a second?
Yes.
I would say, one, I think Brian, man, he shared such a profound story of when young men try to seek out mentorship, right? We crave those relationships, but he almost made decisions that could have crushed him at such a tender age because he was like the gifts and stuff. And so that's such a transparent story that he shared. And so I don't want to answer that question, but what I want to say is that as men, it's our obligation to meet young men where they're at. And that's why I value mentorship. That's why I value guiding and helping the next generation. It's not up to an 8-year-old. It's not up to a 9-year-old to seek out mentorship. They don't know how to make those types of decisions. It's on our shoulders. We can't wait for this call. We can't sit in our homes in the comfort of our homes and wait for these young men to seek us out. We have to meet them where they are at. That's why we're in the neighborhoods. That's why we're in the schools. And that's why it's so important to have these conversations. But then we have to allow it to become action. And so if you're a man out there and you feel like you're in a good place to give back, I suggest you serve, because when young men make decisions of seeking out mentorship, it's easy for them to say yes to the gang member who's offering them a lunch. It's easy to say yes to the pedophile who's offering them toys. So we have to be the ones to meet them where they're at and guide them.
Man, you hit on a lot of points, bro. That's that's major fact. Anybody else want to share on that?
I do, but I'll let somebody else go first.
My man, my man. Brian, you got something? Cliff, anybody? Okay. Yeah, I think on that part, I'm gonna go first, Antonio.
Go for it, my man.
I see. Yeah, I think you know, a lot of what John was saying, I think it's crazy how the honestly how the enemy plays on men, the way that we perceive what manhood is or masculinity is, but we see masculinity and what manhood is through Jesus Christ. But I've noticed how the enemy plays on men to play a huge part in a role to pull other men to different outlets of wickedness or darkness in terms of gangs, or even what John was saying, like the pedophile giving a toy, or, you know, I'll take it a stretch further, just like, you know, what about these men that are pimps, you know, preying on these young women or even boys or whatever, how they do it. And, you know, using their sense of impact to impact this next generation for something like that. And so even as we're talking about it, I'm seeing how it's so important for us men to get out of our comfort zone and really to invest in people that are not our children as well. Antonio hit it on where he was talking about pertaining to me about being a spiritual father, and I didn't even think of that while I was talking. But I remember I was reading not too long ago was First Corinthians. I don't remember the chapter, but Paul's like, you know, there's 10,000 instructors that teach you about Christ, but there's not many spiritual fathers, and it's a huge epidemic in the church when we don't see a lot of discipleship, mentorship, and fathering. How do we get to that place as men to do that? And if we're already doing that, how do we, not even just me, but how do all of us right now, how do we encourage and inspire and empower other men to do the same thing where it continues, not just, oh, look at me, I'm doing an event, because this isn't my mission. My mission is to see men grab other men to do the same thing for the kingdom. You know what I mean? So when I look at you guys, I'm like, and a lot of you guys are already doing that, you know, but it's like, how do we grab other men that are not doing that to have that perspective? And I think over time, I've started to realize that we're not truly understanding the kingdom perspective, because it's not about me being married and, you know, I'm making six figures and, you know, I go to church, I'm a disciple, but I'm not really investing in anybody. You know what I mean? I'm not, yeah, show your daughter, bruh. You know, I'm not really investing in the next generation. How do we do that as men? How do we empower other men for the kingdom?
Can I tap in? High five me. Okay. You know, I think what John and Jordan, what you just said, I think is so valuable to that particular question. I think depending on the child's age, I think it is critical for the parents or the elders, whether it's mom, grandpa, whoever is a part of that child's life, I think needs to be engaged in the process of identifying and finding a mentor for that child's life. It is not a middle schooler's or an elementary kid or like a 6-year-old to try to find and identify his own mentor. Like I'll tell you a quick story. My son's 6 years old. And so this is maybe like 6 months ago. He gets mad at me about something. And my wife was like, you know, we tag team, right, as parents. And she's like, you know, you need to respect your father. He's a good man. And he's like, no, he's not. He's 6 years old, right? So like, we're just kind of playing the situation out. And then my wife was like, well, okay, if your dad's not a great man, who's a great man? And my son puts his head down and he says, Uncle John and Uncle DQ are a great man. And like now my wife like defending me, but I'm like, babe, it's cool. It's cool. Now let me tell you why I'm a great father, because I'm intentional about getting my children around other great men. I think I don't want to be the only voice in my child's life. So like I'm like, hey John, Uncle John, like Godfather, like John, come hang out with your kids. I mean, right? Like come be around my children. Like, I mean, think about like Brother Cliff, like even speaks into my children's life. So I think parents, whoever the parents are, I think they need to be vetting and identifying like, hey, you're gonna mentor my kid. I get text message from moms all the time, like, hey, can you mentor my son? Or can you help me find a mentor? And whether I have the capacity to do it or not, I just think it's powerful, because what that parent is doing is saying, I don't have all the answers, and can you help me find someone who can speak my child's language to help prepare them for the world in front of themselves. And I think that is where men play such a consequential role, is because we help prepare men and women for the world that's in front of them as it relates to relating to other men. So.
Hey, that's fire, bro. That's fire. I
But
like
if my son's a ratchet, it's gonna be John's fault.
Hey, there you go, Blake.
Hey, okay, I
Hey,
promise. And let me can I tell one quick story. I promise.
pass the buck of leadership. Yeah,
Hey,
go ahead, real quick.
Hey, so my son last year, John and I coach at Z Speed, and so I brought my son out this past summer to Z Speed, and my son's like a leader, man. He's been on. I'm in full-time ministry, so my son's always on the stage, in front of a lot of people. So he just is very confident. So my son takes over. He's like leading the whole. There's hundreds of kids out there. He's leading everything, and then he gathers everybody in. He like inspires everyone. Here's this 5-year-old kid, and somebody's like, whose son is that? Whose kid is that? Oh my gosh, whose kid is that? And somebody says, I'm thinking he's like gonna brag on me. He's like, hey, that's John's godson. And everybody's like, oh my God, he's such a great kid because of John. I'm thinking to myself like, bro, I'm this man's daddy. I'm this Negro's daddy. You know what I'm saying? Like, but like John got the props. But I just think to myself, reaffirming, right? Being a good father means positioning my children so that they can be around great men. I am okay if my son in 25 years gets on stage and thanks, Dr. Gaines and his uncles and these great men. I'm okay with that if he thinks like Brother Cliff. Why? Because these are great men.
Yeah. I think someone had mentioned that stood out to them about setting up other, godly men and women to mentor other kids and pour into the next generation. I think from being a youth pastor for 2 years, I realized that whenever I would engage with certain families, they appreciated me being another voice. Obviously, they have their parents. And I love what you said earlier about that perspective of discipleship has to happen in the home. They will be taught in the home. Everything will be provided in the home of what you're saying, mentorship, discipleship, all that. But you're being creative by getting positive, godly people to mentor and disciple your kids. So I think that's important. Does anybody have anything else that they wanted to share? You got another question, John?
Nope. I just want to give a shout out to someone who commented.
Okay.
Diego is a father. He's a father to a lot of the fatherless young women and men. And he said, we don't use our village, and he does a great job at that. He commented, and I just want to encourage us, man. Let's continue. Antonio shared some profound stories, so let's build from this conversation. There's going to be people that reach out to us, but let's become that village. Let's change the narrative, like in our community, right? So thank you, bro. Appreciate it.
That's so good. I wanted to, while we wrap up, I wanted to add something for you guys as resources, something that has impacted my life. Actually, me and Cliff, we read it together. It's called Cry Like a Man by Jason Wilson. He's from Michigan. I want to get an opportunity to, maybe all of us can do it, but I want to get an opportunity to fly up there and meet him. He has an academy where he walks with young men. And what he does is he uses the practicality of using karate, jiu-jitsu, to mentor these young kids and to help them through processing their emotions. Now this is important, and it's not talked about a lot in church culture. I think there's a lot of control. A lot of people can control people, which will turn into will be witchcraft. But Jason Wilson, he said, my mentor told me not to start the academy. If I would have took the advice of my mentor, I would have never had all these different videos that have gone viral of me pouring into these young men, helping them through their issues. And this is something so key about being obedient to God, because your obedience to God is connected to not only the people you're called to reach, but also the people that you're impacting and those that are around them, the group of people that you're impacting. So Jason Wilson is an amazing man of God. And he uses his platform a practical way as a bridge for the gospel to be a minister to them, a servant to them for the gospel. And so, he didn't, start like a church or something like a building, bringing in a congregation, but he's using this practical thing called jiu-jitsu to reach these kids. And it doesn't have to be in the way that a lot of people think it has to be when it comes to sharing the gospel. I'm all for preaching on the street and all that, because I do that, but I think it goes deeper when we walk with men and young men and young women as well. So definitely buy that book. It's called Cry Like a Man. Me and Cliff read that thing. I demolished that thing. That book is really good. It's like a movie. There's another book. It's called The Bible. Like I said, the book of John. The book of John is a very good book to start at. If you've never committed your life to Jesus Christ, if you've never repented of your sins and received the forgiveness of sins by Jesus Christ or what he did on the cross, please do that. Just know that God does love you. Just know that God does love you. He wants you to be in a relationship with him. It's not about religion. It's about being connected to who God is, but you have to understand of what he did on the cross for you. So start in the book of John. You can go on the computer and read the whole book of John. You don't even need a physical Bible. If you need one, I'll give it to you. John got some. We all got some. So hit us up if you need a Bible. The book of John is a very good place to start. Any of you guys want to provide any resources before we end?
Hey, Dr. Gaines has like five books he's either written or writing. Sorry, that's just a seamless plug. Go ahead, John. Hey, Push for Leadership Academy. Any educators out there? This is work that I have invested my life behind. Dr. Gaines, I was it like 10 years ago, started this conversation around how can we empower young males. And so, we're in eight schools and looking to continue to grow. We focus on mentorship. So, we have some curriculum surrounding mentorship and leadership development. So that's Push for Leadership Academy. Check me out on Instagram.
Come on. John, you got any resources for us? Websites? How do we get a hold of you? All that good stuff?
Yeah, I would just say similar to what Antonio said, just to Push for Leadership Academy. And we're also going to work on working on a one-on-one curriculum to where men that really don't know how to start conversations, they don't know how to mentor, they're going to be able to take this curriculum and it's going to serve as a guide. And so more information will be on that, Push for Dreams Leadership Academy. And that's just on johnpushgangs.com. And there's a tab with that. So yeah, nothing else. Just keep being great, man. Thank you for doing this.
John, don't you have a book too?
Yeah, so I do have a children's book, Key of the Queen. It's geared toward young women, but it does serve as another guide. And there's a curriculum that goes along that serves as a guide to help mentor young kings and queens. I'm working on another book as well, 30 Days on Purpose, that really helps because everything I do is based from mentorship. And so this book will be released later this year, 30 Days on Purpose. If you want to do some of that internal stuff before you go out, you feel there's things you need to do internally. And so it's just going to take you through a 30-day guide to get some of that healing and then go out and live your best life. So
anybody else? I have a quick question. This just popped up. All right, last one, then we're done. When it comes to single mothers that are growing up without support, growing up, or I would say not growing up, but going through a process of being a single mom specifically, without men around to help, also, the father's absent, what advice would you give to a single mother? In this context, I'm thinking somebody that's a believer. So what would be your spiritual and practical advice for that mother that's wanting that guidance for her son or daughter? Anybody?
I'll let somebody else go first.
Hey, bro, you can't go no more. You can't go no more, bro. John, you want to hit that or no? You good?
Yeah, I could touch on it, but I do think Antonio has some good stuff to share because that's his story, and he already, and so maybe the person joined late, but Antonio, you shared a great story about what your mom did for you. But I think one, even what Antonio just shared about guiding and understanding, it's okay for your young king and queen to be influenced by great men, but an 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old, they're not in a mature place to make that decision themselves. So it's important that the parent help find those men. You can always tell a great man by his fruit. So if they don't have no fruit, probably not the right person to be mentoring your kid. I'll leave it at that.
Come on. Real quick, Tom.
No, I know I just kind of addressed this question, but I just would encourage like single mamas. I was raised by a single mom. A long list of great single moms in my family, a lot of strong women. But one of the things I just would encourage mamas is to be intentional with finding men in the community, like whether it's in the church, whether it's in school, like my mom knew my teachers' names. Why? Because my mom would pop up and sit in the back of the class and be like, "What's up?" Right? So I think like single mamas have to be engaged in their children's life, right? And I get it, right? My mom worked super hard. My mom worked in Seattle. We lived in Tacoma, right? So it was tough for her to be engaged. But any moment she had, sometimes she'd take a day off just to check up on her children. And whether it was a football coach, but I think she was vetting, right? She was vetting on who was going to be speaking to her children's life. And so I just would encourage mamas to be intentional with finding men in the community, because maybe like it's really hard for a mama like to be, on campus and be super engaged, because I get it, they got to pay the bills. But maybe they know a brother Cliff in the church who you could say, "Hey, my son needs a mentor. He's 9 years old. He's 8 years old. He's in 4th grade, and brother Cliff can help connect." Right. So I'm a connector. So like parents will text me all the time, and I'm like, "Hey, that's not really my age," or "No, I don't really, I don't do." And I'll try to connect them with the right people. So that's my encouragement for mothers, is just to be intentional with finding, like going out in the community and finding someone. And sometimes they don't have to go like beyond their circle. I think just sometimes you can look up. Like I was on a call like 3 weeks ago, and Clarence Thomas, who's a judge, was on the call, and I'm like, my sons were like, "Who's that?" I'm like, he's a judge, a black judge, and he's like, "Hey, bring the kids to the courthouse." So I don't think we have to go beyond our reach. Just find people that we interact with and ask if they're willing to, speak into our children's life.
I love it, man. Hey, I want to, I appreciate that for you sharing that, because that's huge. And I know, honestly, that's been on my heart. God's been putting that on my heart. I've said different questions on Facebook, and that was one of my questions was, how do we support single mothers? I don't think we talk about that much. And I know that's on God's heart for the orphans and the widows, for those that are down and out, and for the fatherless. And the people that need legitimate help, not somebody that's trying to use and abuse us as men of God or the church. But I want to say thank you guys for tuning in. If you guys have any questions, you could still ask them. You could still share this video with other people that would touch, from all these men that have been through so many things. Their stories and things that they've encountered will impact someone else. That's why we're doing this. That's why I put this together. I'm your host, Jordan McLeod, and My brother Cliff is going to end us in prayer, and we're going to be out.
Lord, Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this time, God. We thank you for this conference, God. We just pray that there was healing, God. There was greater understanding about what's going on with all of us, Lord. And help us, Lord, to be all the men, to be better fathers, God, that will rise to the standard and represent, Lord. And as we continue to do that, help us, Lord, to heal us of our pain, any pain that we might have from the past, so we can really bless those that we're raising or mentoring, Lord. Lord, I just pray that the older and the younger generation will come together as one, God, and Lord, help one another. The older generation will mentor the young will help the old, Lord, and will become a force, Lord, that will rise up against the enemy, God, and just, Lord, bless, just to bless all the youth, God, and walk forward in your name, God. Help us to notice those that are hurting, God, that we don't get so busy that we miss someone that could possibly be hurting, that we can minister to, that we can help, Lord. So I just thank you. And I pray for these brothers, God, that we're speaking today, God. I pray that you continue to raise them up in your word, God. Raise them up in your character, God. And just to, Lord, hallelujah, help them, Lord, to fulfill their purpose that you have for them, Lord. So we thank you for all these things, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you, brothers.
Thank you.
Enjoy your night, and I'll see you guys later. All
Part
right,
two. We need a part two.
deuces.